Hello and welcome to the Featherpodcast. We are doing things a bit differently today. We usually do this in Swedish, but today we have an English-speaking guest. I have got to know Heather over the past couple of months. She is a real medical textbook in chicken diseases and medical issues. So I asked her for an interview, and it's 1 hour and a half, a long one, and we get to chat a bit about the differences between Sweden and America and poultry care and the veterinary. But you can start telling me, introduce yourself and how you started with poultry birds.
So I'm Heather Kurlinski, and I started about 10 years ago because, I was a horse person my whole life, and I always had to board my horse. And I had always dreamt of having, a farm or a place where I could have my horses on my property with me. So about 10 years ago, that dream came true. And my husband and I bought a little piece of 14 acres outside of the city. And we were able to, bring my horses to live with us. And, what's a farm without some chickens? I knew nothing. And I was raised in the city, right? I knew nothing about chickens, farm life, anything. But, I just, as I do, jump in feet first and got a flock of 15 from a hatchery. And what's funny is my husband and I had dreamt of having a homestead where it would be sort of self-sufficient, where we could grow, our own food, and we would process our own chickens. So we, get the chickens and raise them. And of course, I immediately fall in love. I'd never been around them. I never realized what personalities they have. And as they grew, they each had their own different voices. Like, I could recognize their different voices and the different things that they liked and how unique and distinctive each one was. And I was like, oh yeah, there's no way. There's no way I'm not one day. Okay, time's up for you, Nikki. I'm gonna take you to be processed. Never. Not only did I not process my own birds, but I stopped eating them altogether because I couldn't eat something that I knew was sentient and had feelings and thoughts and all of that. So then as my birds got older, you know, I would run into different problems. Like, one bird had bumblefoot, and I had a vet who took care of my horses. So I took my chicken to him. He treated them. He treated chickens, but I quickly realized that it wasn't the best. I didn't think that it was the best care that she could have received. And then as other things came up, I felt like they weren't trained. These vets that I was going to weren't trained on chickens. They just kind of took care of chickens because their patients had chickens, and so it was just kind of, they would help, but they didn't really know chickens. So I just found this huge gap and so then I turned to Facebook groups for advice. And I was getting conflicting, I mean, just in the same group, I would get conflicting advice. They would just contradict each other, one line to the next.
I recognize that.
And I was like, I'd never experienced something like this. Like when I had children, there was an authority, that I could trust to go to, like my pediatrician or my mom or, another mom, and they had been through it and they knew, or they could refer me to books to read or whatever. Even with my dogs and my horses, same thing. But I was feeling very overwhelmed because it didn't seem like there was one authority that I could go to that was knowledgeable about chicken health and wellness and medical care. So I realized that if I wanted to know, I was going to have to do the work myself. So I invested in a lot of veterinary books, and learned everything I could. I took classes online. Even I found an avian vet, and she taught me some stuff like how to draw blood or how to listen to the heartbeat, just things like that. And so over the years, I've just gathered some knowledge that I wanted to share with other chicken keepers because I didn't want them to have to go the lengths that I had to go to find reliable, credible, science-based information.
And
So,
that's why I started a lot of the sites and the groups and my website exactly for the same thing. And I was so inspired by your group. So like said, I have started a Swedish group where I translate your posts. I just did translated the post about how to treat an egg-bound hen and posted in that group. And like you said, to spread when you learn just to share that knowledge, a lot of people don't want to share because they are afraid of getting attacked in those groups.
right. And I have a zero tolerance policy for any of that. If anybody says something negative, like I just had to ban somebody a couple of days ago who attacked one of my admins because she didn't like what she was telling her, but it was fact-based, it was scientific. But so I was like, bye-bye, I don't have any tolerance for that. Now if
Yeah.
you disagree, we can disagree about topics or approaches, because there are different ways of once you have the science, there are different ways of implementing it, and that's okay. But you have to do it in a nice way. Like, well, this is what I do. You might work for you or it might not, and that's okay.
Yeah, I had exactly the same thing when I talked with you about apple cider vinegar, and there was a girl that was writing this in my book and selling that. Oh, this is amazing for chickens, and like, no, this can actually be dangerous, and I have the facts to back it up. Why would you like to use something like that could be so dangerous, and spreading it to people that has no scientific merit behind it?
And yeah, that's one of those. I don't even know how it got started, but man, has it taken off like wildfire through these, Facebook groups. And people don't stop to ask, like, just think critically about the advice that you're receiving. Does it make sense? And like, if this was your child, would you give them something you read about on the internet without, double checking it or, thinking critically about it? No, I would hope not. And so what I do now, because there is very little research and data about chickens as an individual. Like there's a lot of research about commercial industry, like dealing with 300 chickens, how to treat 300 chickens because, you know, they're layers for a commercial industry. But there's very little research about how to treat an individual chicken. So what I do is I have several credible sources and I verify anything that I think is good information. Excuse me. I verify it with 2 other sources before I put it forth as a fact, because there's not an authority, you know, that you can say like the American Academy of Pediatrics says, you know, there isn't an authority for chickens. So that's what I have found. And that way I feel secure about putting forth the information. Even if I don't cite the sources, I know that it comes from credible sources.
Yeah, and that's why I think just the foal packs, cross beaks, and special needs, and all those groups are such amazing groups that we lack in Sweden. So there is no. I tried to Google a treatment for sauerkraut in Swedish just a few days ago. Nothing. You couldn't find anything, and that's why I want to translate the posts you have and bring this forth to people. I am lucky enough to have an avian vet I can confirm as a source. And just that, having an amazing avian vet you can speak to, not a lot of people have avian vets. And we can jump to that question. You can talk some about veterinary care, how for chickens, ducks, and so works in the States. Are there a lot of avian vets? Are they knowledgeable? How easy can you find them?
Well, yeah, there's not a lot of avian vets, and they are difficult to find. The only what is it, American, it's AAV. I can't remember what it stands for. It's like American Academy of Veterinary Practice, I think, but they have board certified avian vets. And so to become a board certified avian vet, you have to go, it's quite rigorous. It's like an additional 4 or 5 years on top of your regular veterinary studies. And they'll have after their name, it's board certified avian, you know, because they have different board certifications. But they have a website, AAV, and you can search for international and United States veterinarian avian vets. But even they aren't trained in chickens. They're trained in birds. And so some of that knowledge is relevant to chickens, but not all of it. Like if you think about all the different avian species, you know, you've got raptors, parrots, you know, all, they're very different. And some things are applicable and some are not. So you have to be careful, like not all avian vets will treat chickens, or if they will, they don't know chickens necessarily. And they can make mistakes. I had one vet kill one of my chickens because he flipped her over to draw blood from her the artery in her leg, and she regurgitated, and I guess he didn't catch it, but she aspirated, and so he denied that she aspirated, but I knew she did because I know the signs, and sure enough, she died within an hour of me leaving. And I sent her for a necropsy, and there was fluid in her lungs, and that was the cause of death.
That's
So,
yeah.
So that said, you know, you have to research the vet And also you have to go in with enough knowledge that you can be an advocate for your bird. So
Yeah.
I have found a local vet here who is not, I have two vets that I use. One is the avian vet, who is very expensive, and she always wants to do all of the tests, like a CT and blood work and x-ray, which is great. But it's really expensive, and her hourly rate is like $250, which I'm not sure. It's a lot. I mean, I don't know if you would know what it is, but it's a lot.
I know approximately what is in Swedish kronor.
So, and then I have another vet who's just a regular vet. But I've been going to her for almost 10 years. So she and I have developed a relationship, and she trusts my point of view. And so if I say, like, I need Reglan, which is a crop stimulator, for this bird, she'll give it to me. She'll prescribe the Reglan, because she knows that I know my birds.
Yeah.
And so, it's not like impossible to get good care for your bird from a non-avian vet. You can, but I would also recommend that you kind of have an idea, do a little background research, or, have someone like me that you could talk to before you go in to see the vet, so you know what you need. Because a lot of times they just prescribe this one antibiotic. It's SMZ. I can't remember the full name, but every vet treats it, prescribes it for chickens. And it's a good broad-based antibiotic, but it's not going to work for everything. Like if there's a bone infection, you really need clindamycin. Clindamycin, research shows it's the only antibiotic that penetrates bone with chickens. So I've advised several people who were going in to see their vet to ask for clindamycin. And the vet will push back because there's regulations, federal regulations over what you're allowed to prescribe to chickens and what you're not. And since they don't see chickens a lot, they err on the side of caution. And so they will push back and like, no, I can't prescribe that. But if they look it up, they can. They just weren't familiar with that particular antibiotic. So it pays to do a little research and go in prepared, because you can get the correct medication for your bird. And those birds recovered.
Yeah. I kind of have heard that you in the States that you have a harder regulation how to treat birds. For example, I think the implant to stop the egg laying, that you can't get it on all states, or how is
Now,
it like?
there's a federal regulation against that chickens can't get the implant because they're food, right? And our laws don't differentiate between like a pet chicken or a chicken who is a show chicken, or whatever, a retired chicken or whatever. And so they're all just considered food. So the laws are strict that way. But with an avian vet who understands the laws, all you have to do is make a case for having the implant. And like my vet, I have two chickens that are on the implant to stop egg laying. And so my vet just, I mean, it's not like the feds are going to come and, break down her door and check her files. But if anything were to come up, she can justify giving my birds the implant, because my birds are not going to enter the food line, you know, they're not ever going to be sourced for food.
That's
And
it's kind of interesting because we here if you give a medication to a chicken, we only have like you gotta wait this certain amount of time before you eat the eggs. It's kind of the only regulation we have. We have some medication that gives a lifetime of that you can't eat the eggs, but like my veterinarian told me that this is a ridiculous rule. It's only said that there's no research on what this kind of medication does to the human body through a chicken. So like, I don't know, Metacam, it's named something else in the States, has like 2 weeks withdrawal before we can eat it. But my vet said, eat it anyway. You're not gonna die from it.
yeah, we have, there's a medication, an antibiotic here called Baytril, and or it's the generic is enrofloxacin, and it has a lifetime withdrawal, but it's also illegal to give chickens because they don't want antibiotic resistance in humans. So if the chicken this antibiotic, which is also used for humans, if you give it to the chicken and then the people eat the residue in the eggs or in the chicken, there's a chance that it could cause antibiotic resistance in the human, right? So, but it's not likely. It's not really a lifetime withdrawal. They just haven't done any studies because it's illegal to give to chickens. And the reason why is also because years ago, they were giving chickens antibiotics automatically, and then they would slaughter them and they would, you know, enter the human food chain. So it was, the antibiotics were abused by the commercial industry. And so this medication being outlawed is sort of a reaction to that.
Yeah, I recognize that. We have a huge problem with avian influenza and the commercial lines for chickens. And the majority of the cases of avian influenza here are caused by the commercial lines. And it's the problem of the world. All the diseases comes from the commercial lines of animals.
Yeah.
But I like to go back a bit and ask you how introduce your flock. How many chickens do you have?
So right now I have 12, and so I got that first flock 10 years ago. And I realized that a lot of people were, for whatever reason, needing to get rid of their chickens. And so I started taking in rescues, and I started doing rescue work for roosters. So I would pick up roosters and take them, drive them to their new home or whatever. I would take in rescues, roosters, because roosters can be difficult to rehome. So I ended up with a lot, you know, that couldn't be rehomed. So at my peak, I had 40 chickens, and I was like, yeah, that's too many. And now that my main flock is, you know, older, so my oldest is, I guess it's been 11 years because my oldest is 11. I have one hen from that original flock, and she's 11 years old. And then I have Rudy, my head rooster. He is 10 years old.
That's
And
amazing.
yeah, and then I have another rooster, Rusty. He's a frizzle, and he he came from southern Texas. He was in a animal control like an animal shelter or animal pound. And so I don't really know how old he was, but he was an adult when he came here, and Rudy was a cockerel. So he has to be at least 10. And Rudy was a rescue as well, but he was young, so I know kind of how old he is. But it's funny because those two have been together in a flock for 10 years. And it started with Rusty was the head. And then I had another rescue, a little bantam rooster. Pingu is his name. And so the three of them were great in the flock. Rusty was the head. Rudy was like, or no, Pingu was the second because he was an adult. And Rudy was this giant cockerel because he's a Wyandotte, but he was in his head, he was a baby, you know. So even though he was bigger than everybody else, he acted like a baby and he listened to them when they bossed him around. Then at some point they switched when Rudy grew up and hit puberty and he realized that he was the boss. He was big. There was a switch and then Rudy became the head. And he's such a good rooster though. He's so gentle. He just is like, you know, he'll run them off, and as long as they yield to him, he never hurts anybody. He never fights. That's why we had peace in our flock for so long, even though we had 3 roosters, you know. And Pingu was just a little bantam, maybe like 6 inches tall. And but so we had that flip-flop, right? And now they've lived for years with Rudy being the head, and Rusty being the second. And Pingu died a few years ago, so I only had the 2 roosters in the flock. But I just adopted a little hen. She came with a rooster that I rescued, who was in really bad shape. So I incorporated her into my flock. And Rudy and Rusty are both smitten with her because my youngest hen now is like 7 or 8 years old. And so this little girl is maybe a year old. And so now they're fighting again because they both love this little hen. It's so, you guys, come on. You have all these other ladies. Leave Ash alone.
I recognize that because I have 3 roosters. Like, you know, I have a only silky flock, and I had 3 roosters for almost 3 years, and then I got a respiratory illness during Easter, and my lowest rooster, that was lowest in the pecking order, he took his shot of being the boss. So now it was chaos for a while, but the other 2 yielded, and he's not an amazing leader like my other rooster was, but I kind of have to accept it. It's their way of living.
Yeah.
But to other topics, we don't have what many Swedish people are jealous of is Tractor Supply. You have such a huge store and so many brands to choose from. I like. Can you tell about a bit the pros and cons of Tractor Supply?
Yeah. So I love Tractor Supply. I have 2 that are close to me. Like one in one town over and then one in the other direction in another town. And they are both like, the one in one town is bigger, but so they'll carry more farm stuff. But the other one in the other town, it's in McKinney, is like, because it's a little bit closer to the city, they carry more home stuff, you know. And I just love being able to go to Tractor Supply and buy, you know, like chicken feed, horse feed. I have a pig, So I can get pig feed, dog, cat, everything I need. And I can get like some cute decor for my kitchen, and then get some cute t-shirts, with chickens on them for me. Maybe some Christmas presents for people. I can just spend hours in Tractor Supply. My husband and kids won't go with me anymore because I take too long.
But what I know, the Swedish laws, like how you can buy chicks like out of the bins, I guess that's a huge problem in the States, that people just pick up birds and think, oh, they are so cute, and then they dump them in the wild. Our laws would not allow that type of selling of poultry. It's the same way that we can't ship birds like you do in the States. It's illegal to ship any living things, not even insects you are allowed to ship.
That is the downside to Tractor Supply, because they have the chicks right there. Like, it's chick season right now. And so anybody can go in and be like, oh, chicks, oh, look how cute, I want one. And they're so tiny, right? And you're like, well, gee, I better get like 10 because they're so little. And they sell, coops right there, so you can get a little coop. But the coops they sell are tiny, really only good for 1 to 2, 3, chickens, not for 10. Even though it'll say on it, good for 10, it's not. So that is the downside. So you get, and that's why, like, I did a lot of rescue, because people thought they wanted chicks, but then chicks grow up to be chickens, and they have their own special needs. They do require care. And they poop everywhere. And that's the one reason I think most people are like, no, I changed my mind, is because, a dog poops once a day. Chickens poop like 12 times a day and everywhere. You cannot like house train a chicken. But yeah, I wish that they don't do any kind of like interview or anything to prepare people if they're buying chicks, to make sure that they know what they're getting into. So that is the downside of, and ducks. Chicks are even a little easier to handle than ducks. Ducks get huge, compared to chicken.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of lakes around here, and so people think it's okay to dump their duck, which it's not. They don't have any. First of all, ducks raised in captivity can't fly. It's they have to be taught by their mother, to fly. So if you put, a duck out on a pond or a lake from captivity, they're just going to get eaten by a predator. They do not have the skills to survive. So we do a lot of, I don't do the ducks, but people in my line, my group, do the ducks. They'll go out and try to save the ducks that have been dumped. And chicks don't get dumped that much. Like, they get left behind at a property. But people don't have the expectation that chicks are going to survive in the wild like they do with the ducks. So
Yeah,
like,
I agree.
I've rescued several roosters that were dumped. So people will just go dump them, with knowing that they're not going to survive. They'll just dump them. They don't even give them a chance. Like, they'll dump them in a, parking lot or in a neighborhood, and they know they're not there.
I have seen several people in the States that get that people see that they own chickens, and they think, oh, then I can dump my chickens in their property.
Yeah.
But at least they come to some caring people.
Yeah. Yeah. That happens to me a lot with dogs and cats get dumped on my property. So far, I don't think people have dumped. If they've dumped chickens, they haven't made it to my house. But dogs and cats get dumped out here a lot.
It's so sad, but I gotta give credit to the states for having these rescue shelters that takes in birds. We don't have anything like that in here. I wished we had, because then people maybe would think that they can go, oh, I want a grown-up chicken, and then maybe they would go to the shelter and look at grown-up chickens, because adopting dogs have become really popular. Perhaps adopting chickens could get popular as well.
Well, and they would at least have the opportunity to enter into like a rescue. That's how we find my transportation group. That's how we find a lot of the chickens, because they are taken into a shelter, and then we can help find them homes. So if at least if they had in your country, a shelter, even if they can't keep them, but they might have a better chance of finding a home. But do you have private individuals who can help?
We have sanctuaries for mostly, but none that specialize in the chickens. We have one big one for pigs, and we have one lady that she doesn't rescue in that way, but she teach people a lot about commercial chickens, and can help people find home for commercial chickens.
Oh, that's awesome! Like a layer, like the retired egg laying chickens.
Yes, and she has these fundraisers to get implants for all her chicken, because those implants are not cheap.
Yeah, and they have to be replaced.
Yeah.
For me, it's like well, and now I can go, I don't have to see the vet. It's only my avian vet who does it. In all of Dallas Fort Worth area, which is where I live, there's only one vet who does it, and that's my avian vet, in Grapevine. It's Texas Avian and Exotic in Grapevine. Um, they do it, but the vet costs like $250, and just by itself, like for her time. So the first time you do it, it's really expensive, but now I can just see the tech. They have like vet nurses that can do the implant, so it's not as expensive. And the first time I did it, I had, because my girls have health issues. One has ovarian cancer, and there were studies, just a few studies, that showed the implant cut off the hormones to the cancer. And so the tumor stopped growing. So I had her implanted, but before I had her implanted, I did a lot of imaging and blood work, to figure out what was wrong. But so she is coming up on 2 years that she's had the implant, and she was going to die. Like, that's how she was very sick. And so that's one way that like my vet is able to make a case for the implant, is because the hen was going to die without it because she had cancer. So she gets the implant, and when you first do the implant, they last, I think, longer than, it was either a coincidence of timing, because my hens are older, so they got the implant, and then it was winter. So the first implant lasted through winter, which was like about 6 months, but it may also have just been the natural pause in egg laying that, older hens take during the winter. So I don't really know, but now they have to be replaced every 3 months. And I can tell because one of them is a leghorn, the one who has cancer, and her comb shrivels really tiny. But when it's time for her to get the eggplant replaced, her comb grows. The hormones make her comb grow. So I know I have this nice external indicator when it's time.
That's a
And
much
my other one is a chronic prolapser. She, for years, would prolapse, and finally it happened so frequently that it was not something that could be, they would put it back and they'd put a stitch, but then as soon as it came out, she'd prolapse again. So she's on the implant now for almost 2 years, and she's doing well.
But I like to ask you, I like you said, I have a hen, my first hen that got the implant. She's coming up on 8 months on the small implant. And like you said, there are some indicators like to see, but I can't tell on her. I have noticed that she's starting talking a lot more, but she's not squatting, or she have done the egg song a bit without an egg.
Yeah.
And what should I be looking for her, for the implants, to know that the implant's not working?
Well, so it depends on her age. How old is her? How old is she?
She's coming up on 3.
Okay, so she and is she silky?
Yeah, she's also silky.
Okay. Because I was gonna say, like, sometimes they'll get broody, but silkies are always broody, so that might not be a good sign for her. So my other hen, she will, she started laying eggs, but I knew she was going to start laying eggs because she was hanging out in the nest box. And so I was like, why are you hanging? She's an Easter egger. She was never broody before. And I was just like, is she sick? What's going on? And so that was kind of going on in the back of my mind. And then I found a green egg, which I have a couple of Easter eggers. So I brought her in to quarantine her, so I could watch her. And sure enough, she came in and laid an egg. So I was like, okay, it is you. It's time. So now that it's been almost 2 years, I know that it's like every 3 months. And even if it's a little bit early, it's nice for me because I have them on the same schedule, because the Grapevine vet is over an hour away from me. So I can take them together, and I don't, I just schedule it. I take them together, and the vet nurse does the implant, and then, we leave. It's very fast and easy for me now. But I know that I think they either are on the big one or they get 2 small ones. I can't remember. But how there's like different sizes, like different amount. Because they're both like 5-6 pounds. And but also the other thing is the Easter egger is she has inflammation and she's a little bit overweight. So when it's time, she'll start having breathing issues, like wheezing, that not like actual distress, but I can hear a little wheezing, or see the little tail bob. When they're laying down and their tail bobs up and down, that's a sign of them having to push air through. So that's a sign for her because she's a little overweight. So then when her reproductive tract expands and gets engaged, it puts pressure on her respiratory system. So that's an indicator for her. But like that's probably not going to be for everybody. She's also 9 years old or 10 years old. She's older.
Interesting that you say that, because my first hen that has the implant, she's my biggest hen. She's almost as big as the bruiser, and I would call her a bit overweight as also. She's massive compared to the other hens. But yeah, like I said, I will keep track for that when she starts breathing. It's hot as hell here right now, so they're panting. Anyway, but what was I thinking about? But like you said, the cost of the implant, because it's really interesting. You said 250 an hour approximately. It's about I don't exactly know what the dollar is on now, but it's approximately $100 just to walk inside the door here in Sweden. They don't take each hour, but then they take for each test like that. I think the first implant for my hand was about $300. And then they have like this what you call it when you stamp, so you get cheaper for each time you renew the implant.
Yeah, like a frequent flyer card.
Yeah.
You get a free yogurt when you fill up the card.
Yeah, but what I was thinking about, you saw that I put the implant on my blind hen, and like I said, it was really interesting because my vet have heard some breathing difficulties. But she speculated that probably she had some egg follicles, I believe it's called, pressing on her lungs. So with this implant, I talked with you. I was worried for her to go under sedation, but giving her this implant actually took two problems with it.
Well, that's good. So I do recall speaking with you about this, and her breathing cleared up with the implant.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that must be like the same as my hen when the follicles, because they shrink down with the implant. And so then when they grow back into place, they must put pressure.
But a nice segue to, I like to hear your opinion about these special need birds, since both you and I are a member of Crosspeaks and Special Needs, and there is a fine line when is too much of a special needs. When do you need to let them go, and when can you give them supportive care?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny. I've always believed in a balance between, doing everything you can do to keep a bird alive, but also a balance in the quality of life, right? So, I used to have a house hen, and she was a Merrick survivor. But so she had some, she wasn't very mobile, as a result of her illness. And so that's why she was in the house. But so I did a lot of things for her. I would tube feed her and give her medication and, do all this. But she still, like, she was best friends with my dog, one of my dogs, and she would hang out, like, she had a little box, and if she wasn't in her box, she was supposed to wear her diaper. But she would see me coming with her diaper and she would run back and jump in her box. So most of the time, like, I would let her just kind of hang out in the kitchen because it's a tile floor. If she wanted to be out, I wouldn't, go make her wear her diaper because she just hated it so much. But so I felt, because she would hang out with us and with the dog. So even though she didn't have, her bird flock, I felt she had a really good quality of life with us. I think we were her flock. my family and my dogs, you know, and like she would sleep with my dog and my dog would hang out by her bed, you know, and everything. So, but then it reached a point to where she refused to eat. And I think that it was ovarian cancer. I took her in for imaging, but they couldn't really see anything. But I just knew she was done. You know, because I'd always been able to get her back. You know, she would have these little bouts of illness, but this time she just refused to eat and she didn't want to go outside. And so I chose to euthanize her because I felt like she wasn't engaging with life, you know, and I was worried about her being in pain, even though, because tumors you can't always see on an x-ray. I just felt like there was something in there that was making her not feel good. And she was like 8 years old, a Merrick survivor, you know, so I felt like it was time. So I chose to euthanize her, even though I probably could have, you know, kept tube feeding her and, you know, drag it out, kept her alive. But, you know, just because I can doesn't mean that I should do that, because I have to take into account, you know, her quality of life. And I recently rescued a rooster that was in the worst shape I've ever seen. And it really challenged my point of view of doing everything I can for them as long as they had a good quality of life. He was so damaged that I didn't know what his quality of life was. He had he was about 2 years old. He was a big rooster, a Rhode Island red, and he had had his leg broken at some point and received no medical care, and his leg fused at a 90-degree angle, so he couldn't use it at all to like prop himself up. So he only had one good leg, and he would use that one leg to like kind of hop around, but he wasn't very mobile. So I set up a thing for him to where he could hop all the way around the room, you know, with support by leaning against the wall. And, but he had I think because it happened as an adult, he would not lay down and eat or drink. He insisted on standing, right? And well, when a chicken drinks, they scoop the water up and tilt their head back so it closes the glottis, the opening to their airway, and the water will go down the esophagus. Well, he would try that, but he would lose his balance because he's only got one leg, you know. It's impossible to balance for a rooster because of how their body is. Their legs are so spaced apart. And I was just like, he can't even drink. So I tried everything I could, and I got x-rays to see if there was anything that could be done for his leg to reposition it. But they would have had to break his leg and reposition it surgically and then put pins in place to hold it so that it would be straight up and down, and then he could use it as a peg leg. But I would just thought, what a horrible surgery to put him through. And he weighed 5 pounds. He was skin and bone. So I was trying to get him healthy enough for the surgery if we were going to do it, you know, but it wasn't even to the point where I could make the decision yet. He was skin and bone. He probably should have weighed 8 or 9 pounds, and he weighed 5. But I could not. I suspect he had some form of absorption syndrome because he never gained weight. and he was in a diaper. So I was feeding him and his diapers were full, but he was never gaining weight. And the little hen that he came with they had all kinds of parasites, both internal and external. So I had to treat them slowly for different parasites, because if you kill off the parasites too quickly, the byproduct can kill the bird. So I had to very slowly do that. But anyway, the hen was doing better. She had cleared all the parasites, but he never did. And so I was reaching the point where I thought, because I also thought he was aspirating every time he would drink. He couldn't put his head all the way back, but he would do it like this and drink, and he would cough a lot. So I think he was maybe aspirating a little bit every time he took a drink. But he was one that I was considering euthanizing because of his quality of life. He wanted to run around with that hen, but he couldn't. Like, he would try to follow her, but he couldn't. He would, he had to stay by the wall, or he would come over to me and sit in my lap. He was so sweet, but he just had no quality of life. And he just died a couple weeks ago.
Oh, I can see it's upsetting for you.
Yeah, I could tell he was dying. So at least the decision was taken out of my hands. He had reached the end, and his body was given up. I think that however he broke his leg, if someone kicked him, it could have been, a person or a horse, that they may have damaged his liver too, because their, values, his liver values, but you just don't know if that's starvation or, like maybe he could recover from it, but he just was not recovering. And then he started slowing down. And then one day I was like, I thought I had more time. And then he was not getting up. So I just held him while he died. But I think cases like that, I felt so bad because he had such a crappy life. I wanted him to have a little bit more, but it just, even with the best I could do, I didn't think it was going to be a good quality of life for him. And I think in those cases, it's a kindness to end their suffering, but you can't do it. I think every case should be evaluated for the best thing for the bird. And even if it's hard for the person, like one person may not be able to care for it, but somebody else might. Like that rooster, I drove hours to go pick up because the person who had him wasn't equipped to care for him. So, just because you can't care for him is not, I think, a reason to euthanize. You might be able to find someone who can, but also quality of life. You don't want to just dump, a rooster or a sick bird on someone and prolong their suffering.
Yeah, I see it. It's kind of a sad and a happy thing at the same time, because I believe in lot at least giving them a chance and seeing a spark of life still in their eyes. Like said, I drove about 10 hours to get my crossbeak, and the person that had her, she cares for chickens, but she did not have the knowledge how to care for a crossbeak. And today, just a few weeks after I got her, I noticed that she couldn't fill her crop. And most likely that's why she developed Rhineck, like I talked with you about. So she gets mash feedings, and why I wanted a crossbeak is to have her as an ambassador to teach people about crossbeaks. But it's an amazing thing that you tell about your rooster, and I have started seeing my birds, taking in special need birds. But like you said, you have taken a lot of rescues. How do you do about diseases and mites and all those pesky things to protect your own flock?
So my flock is all vaccinated for Merrick's. Even though, so that was one of the reasons early on I thought I didn't know about Merrick's. So I thought quarantining for 30 days was sufficient. And, you know, my flock got Merrick's, because you can have a bird who is recovered, they will be a Merrick's carrier for the rest of their life. And even though my flock, I had my chickens vaccinated at hatch, but some of the rescues that I brought in, you know, I don't know their history. But now if I bring in an adult, I vaccinate them. There are not really great studies, but there are a few studies that suggest that vaccinating them will for sure not hurt them, but it might help. It might help give their, just like us with the flu or you know, the COVID vaccine, we still will get it, but the vaccine gives our immune system kind of a head start of having experienced and reacting to that disease. So I vaccinate any adult birds. I really don't do much rescue anymore, because my birds are so old that they are very high maintenance now. But I will take Ember, the rooster, that was, you know, he was a very sick bird, and not many people have the capability to care for a bird like that. So I'll take in, you know, birds that need a home like that need extra care. Or like Barry, you remember my rooster Barry? He was.
Yeah, I saw it recently when when you added me on Facebook. I saw that he recently passed away.
Yeah. But he was dumped in a neighborhood, and about 4 years ago, even though I was on a, you know, no more, I didn't want to bring in any more birds, but I couldn't find him a home. You know, roosters are hard to rehome. So I ended up keeping him, and he was, I think he was an old English game bird, and he would fight my roosters to the death if he saw them. I mean, like if he had access to them. Like a couple of times he you know, we left a gate open or something and he got access to them and nearly killed them. But so I just became my house rooster. You know, he became my ambassador. I used him for everything. He was so sweet and he loved people. Anybody who came over could pick him up. Like my friends would bring their children over to meet him, because it's the only time they could ever pick up a rooster. You know, most of the time roosters don't want to be held, but he did. And so I used him a lot for, you know, examples of how to groom, like how to trim spurs, or, you know, how to put on a diaper. And he would just stand there, let me diaper him or do whatever. And but he was my last rescue that I kept before Ember and Ash. But
with this taking in new flock members, you have the protocol of quarantining for 30 days. And I remember how I first come in contact with you. I was taking in a crossbeak that I had in quarantine for 30 days. Took her to the vet to be extra sure that she was healthy. Comes to the vet, she has an underlying infection, and they can't say where the infection comes from, where it is. And she's still healthy today. She's no sign of infection. But after this respiratory issue I had with my flock, I do think she inherited some sort of infection. If they even can be like that, because she is an offspring of my birds. So I think my birds had some sort of infection. But point being that you can never really be too sure when you take in a rescue. And that's so scary, because I want, like you, to rescue a lot of birds. But I spent about $700 to make sure my 2 latest arrivals was healthy, and they still was not healthy. I had the rooster of those 2 died last week in my arms, and he, like you said, he had some sort of he couldn't absorb nutrients, so he died of starvation in some way. His kidneys failed in the end, and that's what is so scary with chickens, that they can get so a lot. In that way, I prefer waterfowl, because they can't get nearly as many diseases.
It's true.
But to compare Sweden and the States a bit, how people see poultry, do you think there is a difference how people view the birds? What I see, my perception of the States, that people have chickens a lot more as pets. In the States, it's not nearly as common as it is here.
Well, you have a very diverse group that have chickens, right? And if you've ever been in one of those backyard chicken groups in the States, you will see every type of chicken keeper in there. There are a lot who treat them like an object, right? Like that they don't have feelings. They don't feel pain. There are a lot of people who think chickens don't feel pain because they don't. Chickens freeze, right, when they feel pain, because it's a survival instinct. If a predator grabs them, if they freeze, the predator might drop them thinking they're dead or whatever. And so that survival instinct kind of reinforces to some people that chickens don't feel pain. And they do. And there are studies, but the studies have only recently come out because one of my first experiences was with a vet who believed chickens didn't feel pain. And since then, there have been more studies, and slowly vets are starting to understand. But that's one of the things that I do is with my chickens is I advocate for pain management. Which they would not necessarily do. Even my avian vet. So I have all of my books. I have formularies and everything. So I research what are the best pain medications, for chickens. And one of my chickens was having surgery. And what they will do is they will gas them down, right? Which is a paralytic. It's not pain relief. And it might put their mind to sleep, but it doesn't relieve pain. So then when they wake up, they're in pain. So I insist on them getting a shot of butorphanol as soon as they wake up so that they are not in pain. And that's not something that they would have done. And then I also insist on them coming home with pain relief, whatever if it's tramadol or meloxicam, depending on how severe the pain is and stuff. So back to your question, though, there are all kinds. There are, for some people, chickens are a way of surviving, of making a living. So they'll sell the eggs, or they'll slaughter the chickens and sell the meat. And then there are people like me who raise them as pets. It's kind of like chickens are having a moment in the last few years where more people are interested in having chickens as pets. So I think some perceptions are changing, but slowly. And I get some of those people who think that chickens don't feel pain, or who were like, oh, you can do that, they're fine, that kind of, I've done that my whole life, my chickens are fine. And I'm like, how old are your chickens? Oh, their oldest chicken is 3. See, people think that a normal lifespan for a chicken is like 3 to 4 years. It's not. Chickens can live up to 15 years with proper care. Now, they do have a lot of diseases, like you were saying. There's a lot of stuff that can take them out. And we don't have the depth of medical care and pharmaceutical care that other species have, like dogs. And it's kind of twofold, because one, people don't take their chickens to the vet because it's so expensive, and so vets aren't trained because there's no demand. And then also pharma, there's no demand for medication, so they don't do the research. So it's kind of like a twofold thing. Now, I think more people are starting to demand it, so there is a little bit more research available. They are starting to look at researching individual chickens. And so my hope is that it's going to continue, and we are going to have more treatment.
People like us.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And there will be more treatment options and more medications for us to use.
Yeah, it's interesting. I want to point out, like you said earlier about the veterinary care, how long study the veterinarians have. Here, there is 2 weeks for exotic animals for Swedish vets. That's all the education they get. And that's a reason why exotic vets can pay extra for that. I really appreciate my avian vet. I don't actually know if she has studied chickens or if she just has experience with chickens. But like when my girl got glaucoma, she said, we have this medication. It's poisonous for pigeons, but it works in parrots. What are chickens? So she would not prescribe that until I have seen an eye specialist that could tell if it would work to use that on the chickens.
Yeah, that's a very interesting example, because that's, like what I was saying earlier about the avian vet. You have so many species. You've got raptors and parrots and pigeons, and some of that stuff can be applied to chickens, but not all of it. In some ways, chickens are more like a dog, than an avian.
Yeah.
But I've learned a lot. When I had my house rooster, I learned a lot from parrots, because parrots live, alone in a cage right in the house. and they have needs that, they have play needs and sexual needs that are fulfilled, with toys and things like that. So I gave my rooster a stuffy that was his meeting friend.
I've seen it.
Yeah. So, but see, I didn't know, and so now I've shared that information with a lot of people who have, aggressive roosters or whatever. And so it's just hormones.
Yeah.
Now, he's never aggressive, but he did need that release because he was young. And so it is helpful, to learn as much as we can about other birds in captive situations and apply it to chickens, especially like socializing, things like that. Medications, maybe not always, but some certainly.
A lot of supplement I tend to use are actually for parrots. Like we have,
Yeah.
I don't know if you have the brand in the States that's called Necton, that has like pure vitamin E, pure vitamin B, probiotics. And a lot of people don't realize that they can just go to any animal shop and look in the bird section and you can use these products. But what I wanted to mention, that with the stuffy, that I wished it would work. I have a bachelor group of drakes, and I wished it would work on them because, like I said, it's mating season, and my mating season lasts from March until September for drakes, and they are completely nuts. So,
That, you know what? I've never seen a drake and a stuffy. I don't. Yeah. What do they fight with each other?
yeah, they fight, and I have the most submissive drake. He doesn't fight back, so he lets the other grip him on the neck, so he gets these nasty wounds. So I had to have him separated, but that's a part of having bachelor groups.
Yeah.
Compared to roosters, drakes works fine 90% of the year. That 10% you need to separate them, but the rest of the year there are no fights, and that's why I am a huge advocate for bachelor groups. I wish I will have a bachelor group of roosters in the future. Most likely my new crossbeak is most likely a rooster, so I will end up with 4 roosters, and I have an egg developing, so let's see if that becomes a rooster as well.
Yeah. You're gonna have a bachelor group. That's enough right there. That's all you need. 3 or 4.
I hope they live in such harmony, so I often think that way, that it's not a problem until there is a problem. I will solve it as it comes, and I don't think people are like, oh, I can only have 1 rooster. If I have 2 roosters, they will fight to the death. And like silky roosters, they are much more friendlier than other breeds against each other. I think that they're most likely bantam breeds in general are much more friendlier against each other. But one last question before we end things up. I was so amazed how old your chickens are, and being predators are the biggest issue. How have you kept them safe for so long?
So I have my chicken coop and run are not far from my house. Like they're kind of, even though I have 14 acres, I don't have it far, so they get some, I think, protection just by virtue of that. I have, it lit, there's activity, and all that, but also it's covered and enclosed with metal. My fencing is metal. It's not fencing, it's metal panels that I bought from Tractor Supply. And then we built a top on it. So it's very secure from that point of view. but the coyotes, I have had coyotes come here and like investigate, and I just shoo them away. And I haven't had any come and try. They could dig under, like my chicken coop is concrete on the bottom, and then there's a wood on top, and then the straw. So they can't dig into my coop, but they could dig into the run. But at night, the chickens, my coop is Fort Knox. It's all closed up. And so if they were to dig into the run, they're not going to get anything. And I have lost chickens to predators. I found the feathers. So I think they were either coyotes or bobcats, and they were in the tree line. So we have like my 14 acres is not grass, it's hay. They're hay fields. So we don't have many trees. So that eliminates the hawks, because hawks like to perch, target, and then dive. And we don't really have many eagles around here. The biggest predator is a hawk, but they can't really. And then I only let my chickens free range when I'm at home. And because they don't go far, when I would let them free range all day, that's when they would wander far, and they would head out to get into the tree line. And that's where 2 of them got grabbed on 2 different occasions. So now I just keep them close. And I also keep I don't know if you guys are able to do this, but I keep stuff prepared for predators. My biggest problem is stray dogs or loose dogs, because they're not scared. The coyotes are scared of me. I just had to shoo them away, but loose dogs aren't. I had one loose dog come and knock me down and grab one of my chickens and kill it, and then drop it and run away. So I keep a revolver loaded with snake shot, which is like buckshot. It's like little beads. So I just shoot that into the ground, and it makes a really loud noise and scares them away. I also keep a bear horn to scare them away. But
that's amazing advice, because I haven't really thought of that, because the closest we have to a weapon is a bow and arrow. But
yeah,
having something that could make a real noise.
yeah, see, I'm like an animal lover. I love all animals. Even that dog that killed my chicken, like, he was sweet. He was just a dumb lab, he shouldn't have been. It was his owner's fault, not the dog's fault. So like, I would never want to hurt a dog, but that's why if I carry the snake shot, it'll make a loud bang, and I don't have to worry about hurting anyone.
It's like you could, I don't know if people could have like a BB gun or something.
Yeah.
Because we have stricter weapon laws in Sweden, so you can only have, even if it's a fake one, you gotta have special permits and stuff like that.
Well, maybe a bear horn, just something that makes. Oh, one thing I have too is like a plastic jug filled with coins, like a milk.
And you
bang
it.
And it makes a loud noise, and it scares dogs. And
this is amazing advice I have never thought about, because I always tell people that the most likely predator to get your chicken, I saw some statistics on this, is your own dog or a neighbor's dog, rather than a predator. So I have electric fencing all around on my property, and when my neighbor's dogs got loose, he got the shock of a lifetime. But yeah, that's amazing advice, and I will post that in some groups. to tell people about it, because we don't have coyotes and raccoons, thank God.
Yeah.
Because our biggest issue is either minks or
Oh.
foxes or hawks. We also have badgers, but badgers tend to, if they are, they will only go after chickens if they are really hungry. And you can't really protect yourself from a badger because they will just tear everything up. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
can be. Fortunately, we do have raccoons, but because of how my property is, I think they don't come, because my house is set back in the middle of my property, like, so we're far from the road, and then the tree line is far, so I think they just don't come here because I never see them. I mean, I see them on the road or whatever, but I've never seen them here trying to get my
we live kind of middle in the pine forest, so we live neighbor to the woods. But I have had 2 predatory attacks, knock on wood, and both of them was hawks, and and only on my ducks. And they both made out fine because they put up a fight and the hawk couldn't lift up with them. And after getting the geese, I have seen a huge improvement. And the geese will let me know if they see something. And mostly a hawk don't want to mess with geese. I had an eagle try to grab my geese right behind my back, a real cocky one. So that's worrisome.
Can you put avian netting up?
Yeah, I have avian netting on my silkies because since they are smaller and not as well protected. Where the ducks are, I have my property split up since I have a bachelor group. I can't have drakes with my chickens. I never recommend having ducks with chickens. So they are on different sides, and where the ducks are, it's such an open area, so and huge area. We don't have 14 acres. I never really got how you measure acres because we have a different measuring system. It's about 500 square meters, I think you say.
Okay.
About half an acre or something like that is in property. But yeah, like the predators are the biggest issue, and like you said, if I'm not home, I close them up. If I'm home, they're free range. And I always keep checking in the windows to see that they are safe.
Well, the bear horn works for hawks. And my pig. Hawks are terrified of my pig.
Is it like a big pig or?
Well, he's a mini pig, right? But mini pigs are anything under 300 pounds. So that's what happens is people buy a mini pig. So the people who bought him, the breeders lie and say, oh, it's a teacup pig. And because pigs are tiny when you buy them, but they grow, they take 5 years to grow. So like they'll say, see, here are his parents. And they're so small, but the parents are like 8 months old, so it's like, you don't know to ask things like that. So that's how I ended up with my pig. Somebody bought him and he grew too big for their house. And he's like, I would say like 250 pounds, something like that. He's classified as a mini pig, but he's not like you wouldn't, if you were to see him, you wouldn't think, oh, that's a mini pig. But farm hogs are like 1,000 pounds, so.
And he will let you know if he sees something suspicious.
Well, so he is very noisy and chatty. He's like almost never quiet. And so he'll like, if he sees me, he'll like come to me and he'll be like, so see me. And so he's making his grunts and stuff. And I've seen hawks. They were perched on the tree line out, and Hammy came out and making his noise, and he didn't know that they were there, but I saw them and they were like, I'm out of here. He appeared, they were gone. And turkey vultures, which they're not, turkey vultures are they eat dead things. But we have a lot of them around, and a couple of them were perched on our house, just taking a break. They don't attack the chickens or anything, so I don't bother them. But when Hamlet came out, they were like, out of here.
That's why since I don't have a dog since 1 year back, and I have thought of other options instead of having a dog, and I have heard that donkeys and alpacas and all those are amazing protectors for your chickens.
Several people that have alpacas as protectors for their property, and donkeys. But my concern is that I have dogs, and donkeys don't differentiate, like, between dogs. They hate all dogs and they'll kick them. So I'm not getting a donkey, but then I'm worried about my dogs. I keep them out of the pasture, but occasionally they sneak in, or my pig. I don't know how they would take to my pig. He also is supposed to stay out of the horse pasture, but occasionally he sneaks in. But I also really want an alpaca. They're so cute.
Yeah, they are cute, but they're so expensive. I heard what they cost in Sweden. I guess it's around $100 or something like that.
Wow. Yeah. I'm sure they're like that here. I have never actually priced them, but I know people who breed them and sell them. So it must be, there must be a demand for them, and they pay enough for them to live.
But we will thank you for your time. I will just
hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you are Swedish, let us know if you like this kind of episode, having it bit in English. We will not stop the Swedish episode. We will most likely only mix it up and have more English episodes.